The honourable member from Brantford Brant.
Mr. Speaker, outright incompetence. That's how senior officials to the Prime Minister described the scandal around the $1 billion green slush fund, $40 million of which is under investigation for suspicious payments. Leaked audio has been recently released, and you won't believe what a Liberal government official said about it. He calls the fund a sponsorship scandal level kind of giveaway. After 8 years of this Prime Minister, he is simply not worth the cost. The unholy alliance of the NDP Liberal spending, scandals and corruption has now caused sponsorship scandal 2.0. The previous Liberal sponsorship scandal began with an Auditor General investigation, and today we learn that the Auditor General is now investigating the taxpayer abuse at the $1 billion Green Slush Fund. Liberal corruption must stop. Common sense Conservatives will finally clean up this mess.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
While the question was for the Prime Minister, I'm glad this member answered, because he reminded Atlantic Canadians that it is just a pause and that if they re-elect this Prime Minister, they will get a massive tax increase on their home heating oil. And where is all the money going? We now know that 60% of Canadians pay more in carbon taxes than they get back in rebates. The difference is funding this wasteful government. We now know that a senior member of the Liberal government's bureaucracy compared their billion-dollar green fund to the sponsorship scandal, saying that it was massive incompetence. Who got rich and who will have to pay?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Innovation welcomes the decision of the Auditor General to conduct an audit, and he also welcomes the invitation that he received to committee next week, where he will be answering Conservative questions with respect to this entire issue, Mr. Speaker. I would also note that the organization has agreed to cooperate fully and is enabling all documents and information to be provided to the Auditor General. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Leeds Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, Canadians are struggling to eat, heat and house themselves, but money from the carbon tax is lining the pockets of Liberal insiders. One government official said that it is sponsorship scandal level giveaway. It's clear that this Prime Minister isn't worth the cost when his billion-dollar green slush fund already has $40 million under investigation. One insider, Annette Verscharen, is a friend of the Prime Minister. It turns out she's also chair of the board. Can the Prime Minister stand up and tell us how much his friend received in contracts from his billion-dollar slush fund?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Mr. Speaker, I find it interesting that the Conservative member began his question by talking about the affordability crisis here in Canada, but didn't end it that way. Allow me to address the fact that Canadians are struggling right now and that the supports that we have put in place are helping them to make ends meet, Mr. Speaker, whether it be the supports through our childcare program, whether it be supports to Canadians who are having a hard time paying for their rent or paying for their mortgage, Mr. Speaker. We have lifted over 2.3 million Canadians out of poverty since coming into government, Mr. Speaker. These programs work, and we will continue to make sure that Canadians benefit from them.
The honourable member from Leeds Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
It's astounding to hear that this member is saying that this program works. This program is under investigation. $40 million, that's the subject of gross mismanagement and conflicts of interest in the Prime Minister's billion-dollar green slush fund. 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, they're picking Canadians' pockets with this carbon tax and putting it into Liberal insiders' pockets. This is a Prime Minister that clearly isn't worth the cost. His friend is chair of the board. She is receiving contracts. Can they tell us exactly how much of the money they've taken out of Canadians' pockets that he's put in the pocket of his friend?
The honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I mentioned earlier, with respect to SDTC, the Minister of Innovation welcomes the decision of the Auditor General to conduct a full audit. The SDTC has agreed to provide all of the information and documents necessary to the committee, and I understand that the Minister of Innovation will be appearing before the committee next week in order to answer everyone's questions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The
honourable member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, the Prime Minister's new Liberal scandal has exploded once. This one is the billion-dollar green fund slush fund, which is being investigated by the Auditor General. This has come from the bloc-supported carbon tax. Daniel Leblanc from Radio-Canada stated that this is similar to the sponsorship scandal. Can the Prime Minister rise today and clearly say which Liberal friends have benefited from this bad generosity? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, what we expect of organisations is that they respect the strictest guidelines of governance. As I said earlier, the Minister for Innovation warmly welcomed the conclusions of the Auditor General of Canada to proceed with an audit, and the Minister himself will appear before the committee next week in order to respond to questions. Thank you very much. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Mr. Speaker, whistleblowers are very disappointed by how slow the government has been acting. In the same report, a high-ranking bureaucrat said this was negligence and laziness, purely and simply. That's what this bureaucrat has said about this Liberal government's management. After 8 years of this Liberal government, another proof that they are not worth the cost. Why did the Prime Minister drag his heels in this affair, which does look like the sponsorship scandal at the end of the day? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I can confirm today that the Department is working in close collaboration with the Office of the Auditor General on the question, and this since the very beginning of their work. As I said earlier on, the Minister for Innovation warmly welcomes the Auditor General's decision to move forward with an audit. Mr. Speaker, the Minister will appear before committee and Conservative questions and other parties' questions next week at committee. The Honourable Member for